Instructor Krell stood at the front of the assembly hall, all four arms crossed in what every species in the galaxy recognized as the universal posture of someone who was absolutely done with your nonsense before you even started. He was a Sorathan, which meant he looked like someone had taken a Komodo dragon, given it biceps, and then added a really bad attitude and a whistle. "Welcome to the Galactic Survival Academy," Krell announced, his voice like gravel being chewed by a garbage disposal. "I have trained over 15,000 cadets from 247 species. My success rate is 99.3%. The 0.7% didn't follow instructions." He paused for dramatic effect. Several of the alien cadets shifted nervously. They died. More nervous shifting. One small, gelatinous alien in the back made a squelching sound that might have been a whimper. "The rules are simple," Krell continued, beginning to pace with the kind of military precision that made recruits instinctively stand straighter. "No weapons. No technology beyond basic fire-starting tools. No calling for rescue unless someone is actually dying. And even then, I'll be the judge of that. You will learn to survive using your wits, your instincts, and the natural resources available to you." He swept his gaze across the assembled recruits. There was Torque, a massive chithnoid who looked like a rhinoceros beetle had gone to the gym and developed an ego problem. There was Pila, a floating crystalline being who communicated through light pulses and was probably regretting having signed up for a wilderness course. There were a dozen others, representing the diverse and occasionally questionable spectrum of galactic life. And then there was the human. Jake Murphy sat in the third row, looking remarkably unremarkable. Average height for his species, brown hair that seemed to have been cut with a bowl and optimism, and a smile that made Krell's scales itch with suspicion. He had a backpack. Just a simple, worn backpack that looked like it had seen better days and several worse ones. "You," Krell said, pointing one clawed finger at Jake. "Human. First of your species to ever enroll. Do you understand the rules?" "Yes, sir," Jake said cheerfully. "No weapons allowed." "Correct." Krell narrowed his eyes. "What's in the backpack?" "Just the standard gear from the supply list, sir. Canteen, basic rations, fire starter, thermal blanket, first aid kit. All approved items." Krell stomped over and snatched the backpack with two of his four hands. He rummaged through it aggressively, pulling out each item and inspecting it like he was searching for contraband at a prison. Everything checked out. Standard issue. Completely regulation. He threw the backpack back at Jake, who caught it with an oof and that same unsettling smile. "Listen carefully, all of you," Krell announced, returning to the front. "Tomorrow we drop onto Verdana 6. It's a Class 4 hostile. Jungle world. The predators are numerous, fast, and hungry. The plants are 50-50 on whether they'll feed you or dissolve you. You will have 72 hours to survive and reach the extraction point 15 kilometers from the drop zone." He pulled up a holographic display showing a rotating image of a planet that looked like someone had taken Earth's Amazon rainforest and dialed every dangerous feature up to 11. "Work together. Use your species' natural advantages. Follow your training. And remember, the moment you think you're clever enough to bend the rules, the jungle will remind you that nature doesn't care about your creativity." He stared directly at Jake when he said that last part. "Any questions?" Torque raised one massive claw. "What if we encounter the apex predators? The Verdana Razorbacks?" "Run," Krell said flatly. "Or climb. Or hide. But do not fight. They're 3 meters of muscle, fang, and terrible life choices. Without weapons, you won't win." "Sounds exciting," Jake said, still smiling. Krell felt a headache forming between his eyes, which was impressive considering his species didn't typically get headaches. There was something about this human, something in that casual confidence, and the way his eyes kept flickering around the room like he was cataloging every object and calculating its potential uses. "Dismissed," Krell growled. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we separate the survivors from the statistics." As the cadets filed out, Krell watched the human go, backpack slung casually over one shoulder. He'd trained thousands of aliens. Proud warrior species, hive minds with distributed intelligence, energy beings who could barely interact with physical matter. He'd seen every type of cadet, every survival strategy, every creative interpretation of the rules. But he'd never trained a human before. Krell had read the file, of course. Earth. Death World classification. Species evolved as persistence hunters who literally chased their prey until it died of exhaustion, thrived in nearly every environment on their planet, ate poison for fun and called it spicy food. Still, Rules were rules. No weapons meant no weapons. What could possibly go wrong? The dropship deposited them in a clearing at dawn, and within 30 seconds, Krell realized that Verdana 6 was in a particularly hostile mood today. The humidity hit like a wet blanket made of soup. The air smelled like decomposing vegetation, having an argument with exotic flowers. Somewhere in the distance, something roared, and something else screamed back. "Perfect," Krell announced, spreading all forearms wide. "Welcome to paradise. Form up." The cadets assembled in a nervous cluster. Torque tried to look tough, which was easy when you had natural armor plating. Pila floated anxiously, her crystalline surface refracting the green-filtered sunlight. The small gelatinous alien, whose name was Bloop, was already sweating, which for his species meant he was literally getting smaller. Jake stood at the edge of the group, already looking around with that same unsettling interest. His eyes tracked movement in the canopy, assessed the soil composition, noted the wind direction, and generally behaved like someone who was on vacation in a place designed to kill him. "First lesson," Krell barked. "Shelter. Without proper shelter, the night cold will kill you just as dead as any predator. Observe." He moved to a cluster of thick bamboo-like plants and began demonstrating the proper technique for harvesting them without tools. Bend. Twist. Leverage the plant's natural weak points. Within minutes, he'd constructed a basic lean-to frame that would keep rain off and retain heat. You use what the environment provides. Nothing more, nothing less. This is survival in its purest form. The cadets began practicing. Torque snapped bamboo stalks like they were breadsticks, showing off his strength. Pila struggled with the concept of physical construction but managed to wedge some branches together using her crystalline projections. Bloop mostly just looked worried. Jake, meanwhile, had wandered off about 10 meters and was collecting things. "Murphy," Krell shouted. "What are you doing?" "Just gathering some materials, sir," Jake called back cheerfully. He had an armful of vines, several rocks of different sizes, some branches, and was using his foot to test the flexibility of a thin, springy sapling. "We're building shelters, not starting a collection." "Right, yes, shelter. Definitely building a shelter." Jake dropped his collection in a pile and started working on his lean-to. Sort of. He seemed more interested in sorting his gathered materials by some criteria only he understood. Krell made a mental note. Humans apparently had hoarding instincts. "Second lesson," Krell continued once most of the shelters were complete, or at least structurally ambitious. "Fire. Without fire, you lose the psychological battle. Fire means safety, warmth, and our climb. Cooked food. It means civilization, even in the wilderness." He demonstrated the bow drill method, using friction and patience to coax smoke, and eventually an ember from processed wood. Several cadets tried and failed, producing only blisters and frustration. Jake succeeded on his second attempt, which was actually impressive. Then he kept making more char cloth than anyone could possibly need, carefully storing it in a section of his torn shirt sleeve that he'd apparently converted into a pouch. "Murphy, one fire is sufficient. Just preparing backup materials, sir. You know, in case." "In case what?" "In case of fire-related emergencies." Krell stared at him. "The fire is for preventing emergencies." "Right. But what if we need multiple fires? For signaling, or creating a perimeter, or build your shelter, Murphy." By midday, the group had established a basic camp. Krell had successfully taught water procurement, showing them which plants stored drinkable water and which ones stored liquid regret. He'd identified edible plants versus the ones that would make you wish you'd chosen the predator death instead. Through it all, Jake kept collecting. A particularly straight branch here, some sharp-edged stones there. He tore a strip off the bottom of his shirt and braided it with some plant fibers. He filled his water bottle, drank half, then spent 10 minutes analyzing the bottle itself like it held the secrets of the universe. Torque noticed. "Hey human, you planning to survive or open a museum? Can it be both?" Jake replied, now testing the tensile strength of a vine by pulling it taut between his hands. "You look ridiculous. We're supposed to be using our natural advantages. Your advantage is supposed to be your endurance or whatever, not collecting garbage." "Oh, this isn't garbage," Jake said, still smiling. "This is potential." "Potential what?" "Yes." Torque's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion or irritation. With chithnoids it was hard to tell. Krell decided to intervene before this turned into a philosophical debate. "Murphy, I'm confiscating this." He grabbed the straightest branch from Jake's pile, the one that most resembled a weapon. "This is too close to a spear." "No weapons means no weapons. Of course, sir. Totally understand. Jake watched the branch go with the expression of someone whose backup plans had backup plans. As evening approached, Krell felt satisfied. The cadets were tired, but learning. They'd followed instructions, worked within the parameters, and nobody had died yet. By his standards, it was a successful first day. He settled near the fire to take first watch, confident in his 15,000 cadets' worth of experience. That's when the rustling started in the undergrowth. Then the smell hit. Musky, predatory, and definitely carnivorous. Then the growling, low and hungry, coming from multiple directions. Krell's scales went rigid. Everyone up. Now. We have company. 3 Verdana, razorbacks emerged from the jungle, each one a nightmare of muscle, fang, and evolutionary bad attitude. They were early. They weren't supposed to range this close to the drop zone. The cadets panicked instantly. Torque backed up, armor plates spreading in defense mode. Pila shot 15 feet straight up into the canopy. Bloop made a sound like a squeezed stress ball, and Jake calmly reached into his pile of collected junk and pulled out a rock tied to a braided vine. Okay, he said pleasantly, testing the weight. Let's see how this goes. Krell felt his headache return with a vengeance. The largest razorback, which Krell mentally dubbed "Oh no," snarled at the group with teeth that looked like they'd been designed by a committee of sadists. Its 2 companions, bad idea and terrible decision, flanked it with the coordinated efficiency of pack hunters who'd done this before and enjoyed their work. Standard dispersal pattern, Krell commanded, falling back on training. Spread. Out. Make yourselves harder targets. Move toward the trees. Use elevation. The lead razorback charged. Torque let out a Jan cry that sounded like a freight train colliding with a horn section and tried to stand his ground. Admirable. Stupid, but admirable. The razorback was 3 times his size and clearly unimpressed by his bravado. That's when Jake's rock on a vine whistled through the air. The improvised bola wrapped around the razorback's front legs with a meaty thwack, and 300 kilograms of apex predator suddenly discovered that legs only work when they're separate entities. It went down hard, face first into the dirt, with a surprised grunt that suggested this had never happened before in its entire evolutionary history. Weapon 1, Jake announced cheerfully. Bola, very effective against quadrupedal charges. Thanks for the field test. Krell's jaw dropped, which was significant because Sarathan jaws didn't drop easily. That's a weapon! It's a rock and some! Vine, sir. Both naturally occurring materials. I just combined them using basic knot tying, which I believe was in the approved skills list under practical applications of cordage. The second razorback, undeterred by its companion's humiliation, circled toward Bloop, who was now roughly half his original size from fierce sweating. Jake reached into his pile and pulled out a sharpened rock hafted to a stick with more braided plant fiber. Don't you dare, Krell started. Jake threw it. The improvised spear sailed through the air and embedded itself in the ground directly in front of the razorback's nose. The predator skidded to a halt, apparently having complex thoughts about its life choices. Weapon 2, throwing spear. I actually would have aimed for the flank, but I'm still calibrating for Verdana 6's gravity. It's 0.83 Earth standard. Throws off my trajectory by... Murphy! Yes, sir? Stop making weapons. Sir, with respect, I'm not making weapons. I'm applying creative problem-solving to environmental resources in service of the survival mission parameters. The third razorback decided this was all too weird, and maybe it should just eat the floating crystal thing in the tree. It started climbing toward Pila, who pulsed distress signals in colors that didn't have names in most languages. Jake sighed, pulled his belt off, and with a practiced motion, snapped it like a whip. The crack echoed through the jungle, and the razorback froze. Weapon 3. Improvised whip. Standard leather belt, reinforced with, I can see what it is, Krell roared. The first razorback had managed to untangle itself from the bola and was backing away, making eye contact with Jake and very clearly deciding that whatever this small, squishy creature was, it wasn't worth the trouble. The other 2 seemed to reach a similar consensus. Within 30 seconds, all 3 razorbacks had melted back into the jungle, probably to find a therapist and work through their trauma. The clearing fell silent except for the normal sounds of a hostile alien jungle and Bloop's panicked squelching. So, Torque said slowly, his mandibles still spread in defensive posture. Human. What in the 17 hells was that? Basic survival tactics, Jake replied, casually threading his belt back through his pants loops. The key is to recognize that literally everything around you is either a tool, a weapon, or food. Sometimes all 3, but you have to check for poison first. Krell stomped over. all four arms gesticulating wildly. You violated the core principle of this exercise. No weapons. I didn't bring any weapons, sir. You made weapons. I made tools that happen to have defensive applications. You can't just... Krell's translator chip seemed to be struggling with his rising blood pressure. The spirit of the rule says no weapons, Jake interrupted, still maddeningly calm. I followed that rule. Everything I used, I found here or brought as approved equipment. The rocks? Natural. The vines? Natural. My belt? Approved personal item, clothing category. My water bottle? He held up the metal container, which Krell now noticed had a suspicious dent in the bottom shaped exactly like a skull-cracking cudgel. Standard issue equipment. I'm just being resourceful. Resourceful, Krell repeated flatly. It's kind of our thing. Pila floated down from the tree, still pulsing anxious yellows and oranges. She projected a light pattern that the translator rendered as, did the human just weaponize his pants? Belt, Jake corrected. The pants are weapons 7 through 9, depending on configuration. I can make a sling, a bandage tourniquet that doubles as a garrote, or if I tear them the right way, a pretty decent net. Weapons 7 through 9, Krell repeated, his voice taking on the hollow quality of someone whose worldview was actively collapsing. How many weapons do you have? Jake looked at his pile of known, collected materials, did some quick mental math, and smiled that smile. Currently assembled and field ready? About 12. Total potential, if I get creative and we're counting combination applications? He paused for effect. 47. Bloop made a sound like a balloon deflating. Torque's mandibles clicked rapidly. 47. You've been here for 8 hours. Well, technically 10 if you count the dropship descent. I spotted some useful materials through the window. Krell sat down heavily, which was something he never did on survival exercises. He prided himself on being the unshakable authority figure, the voice of discipline and order in the chaos of nature. This is why humans have never enrolled before, isn't it? He asked quietly. I mean, I don't want to assume, Jake said, but yeah, probably. We're kind of difficult to set rules for. We see the rules, we understand the rules, we follow the rules, and then we find a loophole you didn't know existed and drive a truck through it, sometimes literally. It's not malicious. We just really, really like solving problems, and rules are problems with consequences. Everything's a weapon to your species. Not everything, Jake said thoughtfully. But yeah, most things. It's a survival trait. Our planet tried really hard to kill us for about 2 million years, so we developed this habit of looking at everything and thinking, how can I use this to not die? Eventually that became, how can I use this to make the other thing die instead? And then how can I use this to make a sandwich? Humans are very motivated by sandwiches. Krell looked at his carefully structured survival exercise, his perfectly balanced curriculum, his 15,000 successful graduates. Then he looked at the human, standing there with a torn shirt, a pile of random jungle debris, and 47 improvised weapons. We're going to have a very long talk when we get back to base, he said. Yes, sir, Jake agreed. Though we should probably fortify the camp first. Those razorbacks might come back. And I noticed some tracks earlier that suggest there's something bigger in the area. Much bigger. Like, maybe we should start working on weapons 13 through 25 sooner rather than later. Krell put his head in all four hands. It was going to be a very long 72 hours. The campfire crackled between them as Krell sat across from Jake, all four arms crossed in what had evolved from authoritative disapproval into something closer to morbid fascination. The other cadets had formed a semicircle, equally horrified and captivated. Explain, Krell said. It wasn't a request. Sir, I'm not sure what the weapons, Murphy. All of them. I want a complete inventory of every single improvised instrument of destruction you've created from my carefully curated survival exercise. Krell's voice had taken on the tone of someone who knew they were about to regret asking but couldn't stop themselves. Like, watching a shuttle crash in slow motion, Jake brightened considerably. Oh, you want the full breakdown? Okay, great. So, weapon 1 was the bola? We covered that. Weapon 2, the throwing spear. 3, the belt whip. 4, he reached into his pile and pulled out a smooth, palm-sized stone. Is this rock? Perfect weight distribution. Fits nicely in the hand. Aerodynamic enough for throwing. Heavy enough for close-quarters skull percussion. Skull percussion, Torque repeated quietly. He means hitting things in the head. I know what he means, Krell growled. Weapon 5, Jake continued, clearly enjoying himself now. is this slightly larger rock, which has a sharp edge. It's basically a hand axe. Can chop, can scrape, can probably dig if we needed to, though digging seems like weapon 30-something territory. Weapon 6 is these vines here, which I've prepared as garrotes, tripwires, or climbing rope depending on application. He pulled out a section of bamboo. Weapon 7. Blowgun. Hollow, straight. And if I carve some darts from this harder wood and maybe apply some of that toxic sap from the plant you warned us about? Don't give me that look, sir. You literally pointed out which plants were poisonous. That's just applied knowledge. I've got a ranged poisoning delivery system. Pila pulsed a concerned magenta. The human is going to poison things? Only if they're trying to eat us, Jake assured her. I'm not a monster. Weapon 8 is my water bottle, as previously demonstrated. The base makes an excellent bludgeon. Weapon 9, my boots. The toes are reinforced composite, good for kicking. Also, if I remove the laces, he started unlacing one boot, I've got another cordage option for snares or strangulation. Stop unlacing your boot, Krell ordered. Yes, sir. Jake relaced it. Weapon 10, my shirt. Already tore strips for cordage and charcloth storage, but the main body can be a net, a bag, or if I soak it in fuel and wrap it, around a stick, a torch that's also a flail. A torch flail. The pioneers of human history were very creative, sir. Loop had somehow gotten even smaller. Weapons 11 through 15 are variations on spears and stakes, Jake continued, gesturing to a neat row of sharpened sticks. Different lengths for different applications. Throwing, thrusting, perimeter defense, deadfall traps, punji pit construction. We're not building punji pits, Murphy. Not yet, no. But it's good to have options. Weapon 16 is this curved stick that makes a decent club. 17 is a sling, just needs a pouch and some cord. Already have both. 18 is a fire-hardened wooden spike that could function as a stake or dagger. 19, and I'm really proud of this one, is my thermal blanket. He pulled out the thin, metallic emergency blanket from his pack. Now, I know what you're thinking. Jake, that's not a weapon. That's survival equipment. But watch this. He wrapped a section around his forearm. Reflective surface can be used for signaling or disorienting predators with reflected sunlight. It's also slightly abrasive, so with the right motion, he demonstrated a slashing gesture. You can cause superficial cuts. Plus, if I tear it into strips and braid it with plant fiber, I've got a flexible, strong cord that's great for snares. Krell's headache had evolved into a full migraine. You weaponized your emergency blanket. I survival enhanced it, sir. That's the same thing. Semantics. Jake was already moving on. Weapon 20 is my first aid kit scissors. Small, sharp, easily concealed. 21 is the tweezers from the same kit. You'd be surprised how effective a precision stabbing tool can be. 22 is my fire starter. The metal striker makes an excellent scraping tool or can be used to create sparks to ignite accelerants for area denial. Torque leaned toward Pila. Is he talking about setting things on fire? I believe the human is always talking about setting things on fire. Pila pulsed back. Weapons 23 through 30 are various trap configurations, Jake said, now standing and beginning to gesture enthusiastically like he was giving a lecture. Snares, deadfalls, tension traps, pit traps, all theoretical at this point, but I've identified good locations around the perimeter. 31 through 34 are throwing rocks of different sizes. 35 is a sap club that's sticky tree resin we found. Coat a rock, attach it to a stick. Now you've got a mace that also glues itself to whatever you hit. That's horrifying. Bloop managed to squelch. That's effective, Jake corrected. 36 is a simple lever-based catapult I can build with these branches. Nothing fancy, but it'll launch a rock about 20 meters. 37 is a razor-sharp shell I found near that stream natural edge, perfect for cutting. 38 through 40 are various strangling implements using different cord. Materials to test tensile strength and flexibility trade-offs. Krell held up a hand. Please stop. We're almost done, sir. 41 is this section of bamboo that I can use as a water gun for irritant delivery, think pepper spray, but jungle edition. 42 is my belt buckle, which detaches and has a sharp prong. 43 is a bundle of those irritating fire ants I collected in a leaf pouch chemical warfare, basically. 44 is a weighted net I can construct from my remaining shirt and some rocks. You have remaining shirt? Torque asked, looking at Jake's increasingly tattered clothing. Most of one sleeve, yeah. 45, Jake continued, is a simple atlatl spear thrower for increased range and force. 46 is a fire-starting bow that can also function as an actual bow, if I make arrows, which I can. I just haven't yet because that seemed like it might be pushing it. The entire group stared at him. And 47? Krell asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake grinned. 47 is me. Human biomechanics are weapon enough. We've got thumbs, which give us a grip strength that can crush through surprising materials. We've got teeth that can bite through flesh and bone if necessary. We've got elbows and knees that are essentially biological hammers. We've got fingernails for scratching and gouging. And we've got the ability to enter a psychological state my people call berserk mode, where fear turns off and violence turns up, usually accompanied by yelling and poor decision-making. Berserker rage, Krell said flatly. You're telling me humans have weaponized panic. We prefer to think of it as tactical aggression, but sure. Torque's mandibles were clicking so rapidly it sounded like maracas. This is insane. Your species is insane. Our planet was trying to kill us for 2 million years, Jake repeated. We learned to kill it back. Then we learned to eat what we killed. Then we learned to make friends with some of the things trying to kill us, and taught them to help us kill other things. Dogs, cats, horses. Domestication is just long-term strategic alliance building with tactical application. You befriended predators, Pila pulsed in confused orange. We befriended everything. We looked at wolves and said, you know what would be great? Tiny wolves that fit in purses. We looked at apex predators and said, what if it was fluffy and lived in my house? We looked at things with venom and said, I bet we can make medicine from that. We looked at the entire concept of death and said, not today, so consistently that our average lifespan doubled in just a few centuries. Krell stood slowly, processing this information with the expression of someone whose entire career was being reevaluated in real time. Murphy, he said carefully. Are you telling me that your entire species looks at everything, everywhere, and immediately calculates its combat potential, nutritional value, and possible friendship? Status? Jake considered this. I mean, when you say it like that, it sounds weird. Answer the question. Yes, sir. Pretty much. Silence fell over the camp, broken only by the crackling fire and distant jungle sounds. Finally, Torque spoke. So when you asked if humans are naturally paranoid or naturally creative, and you said yes, I meant both simultaneously, all the time, forever, Jake confirmed. It's exhausting, but it's kept us alive. Also, for what it's worth, I think you all are doing great. Bloop hasn't evaporated completely. Pila's got excellent altitude discipline, and Torque, your defensive posture earlier was really solid. You just need to be more proactive about environmental weapon procurement. I feel like we're missing the point, Krell started. A roar split the night. Not the razorback growl from earlier. Something deeper. Something that made the previous predators sound like angry house cats. Everyone froze. So, Jake said conversationally, already reaching, for weapons 15, 16, and 22. Anyone want to revise the no weapons policy? Or should we stick with my current interpretation? Krell looked at the jungle, looked at his terrified cadets, looked at Jake's arsenal of improvised destruction, and made a command decision that would alter Galactic Survival Academy curriculum for generations. Everyone grab something sharp, he ordered. Murphy, you're now assistant instructor. Teach them how to not die. Jake's smile could have lit the jungle without the fire. Yes, sir, this is going to be fun. The roar came again, closer this time, accompanied by the sound of trees snapping like breadsticks. Whatever was coming didn't believe in subtlety or personal boundaries. Okay, quick assessment, Jake said, shifting immediately into what Krell was disturbing to recognize as tactical command mode. Torque, you've got natural armor and strength. Your close quarters defense. Grab that sap club weapon 35 and position yourself at the fire perimeter. Anything gets past the traps, you hit it until it reconsiders. Torque grabbed the improvised mace, testing its weight. I can work with this. Pila, you've got mobility and height advantage. Take weapons 6 and 17, the vine cordage and the sling. Get up in that tree with the good sight lines. Your ranged harassment. Anything approaches, you start pelting it with rocks. Aim for eyes, joints, anywhere sensitive. Pila pulsed uncertain yellow but floated upward, gathering the designated weapons. Bloop, buddy, I know you're scared, and that's actually perfect. You're small and quiet. Take weapon 18, the fire-hardened spike. Your job is to hide in that hollow log and be our surprise reserve. If something gets past all of us, you're the surprise stabbing contingency plan. Bloop squelched something that might have been agreement or existential dread. Possibly both, and oozed toward the log with his tiny spike. Sir, Jake turned to Krell. You've got 4 arms, military training, and an intimidating presence. You're taking weapons 2 and 7, throwing spear and blowgun. You're our precision striker. You've also got command experience, so you call movement patterns. I'll handle tactics and adaptation. Krell found himself taking the weapons before he'd consciously decided to participate in this madness. 15,000 graduates, and he was taking orders from a human who'd been here less than a day. What about you? Krell asked. Jake had already armed himself with multiple weapons, strapped and positioned for quick access. The belt whip hung ready. Throwing rocks lined his pockets. He held a particularly nasty-looking spear in one hand, and had somehow fashioned a small shield from his backpack in some bamboo. I'm mobile offense and creative problem-solving. Basically, I'm going to annoy it until it makes a mistake. Then we exploit that mistake aggressively. That's your plan? Annoyance? Sir, I can't stress this enough. Annoyance has been humanity's primary military strategy for our entire history. We annoyed the mammoths into extinction. We annoyed our way to the top of the food chain. We're very good at it. The undergrowth exploded as something massive burst into the clearing. It was, objectively, the most horrifying thing Krell had seen in 40 years of survival instruction. Imagine if a bear and a gorilla had a baby. Then that baby was raised by a nightmare and educated in the fine art of murder. It stood 4 meters tall, had arms like tree trunks ending in claws like scythes, and a mouth that seemed to be mostly teeth with some face attached as an afterthought. Oh, good, Jake said with absolutely deranged cheerfulness. It's exactly as bad as I thought. Execute a defensive pattern alpha. We don't have a defensive pattern alpha, Krell shouted. We do now. It's the one where everyone does the thing I just told them to do. Pila, to her credit, immediately started launching rocks. From her elevated position, her aim was decent, and the creature flinched as stones pinged off its skull. It wasn't hurt, but it was definitely noticing. The creature charged toward the fire, and Jake moved. He grabbed a burning branch, apparently that was weapon 48, improvised during the explanation, and thrust it at the creature's face. The beast recoiled from the flame, buying seconds. Torque, now! Torque swung the sap club in a devastating arc that connected with the creature's shoulder. The sticky resin did its job, and the club adhered on impact, throwing off the creature's balance. It roared in fury and pain. Krell, soft targets! Krell's training kicked in. He launched the throwing spear with 2 arms while his other 2 prepared the blowgun. The spear sank into the creature's thigh, not deep, but enough to matter. The creature's roar went up an octave. Jake was everywhere at once, dancing around the creature's attacks with the kind of reckless agility that came from a species that thought parkour was a reasonable hobby. He lashed out with the belt whip, targeting eyes and nose, then rolled away from a retaliatory swipe that would have separated him from most of his structural integrity. It's favoring the left side, Jake called out. Concentrate fire left quadrant. More rocks from Pila, now all targeting the injured leg. The creature staggered, adjusting its stance. Torque. Tripline position 3. What's position 3? Torque yelled back. The vine I set up 2 meters to your left. Pull it taut when I say go. Jake ran directly at the creature, which seemed like suicide until Krell realized it was calculated suicide. The beast lunged. Jake dove and rolled. And go! Torque pulled the vine tight. The creature's good leg caught the improvised tripwire at a dead run. 3 tons of apex predator suddenly discovered that forward momentum and leg entanglement make terrible dance partners. It went down hard. Bloop, now! The small gelatinous alien oozed out of his hiding spot with surprising speed and jabbed his fire-hardened spike directly into the creature's exposed underbelly. It wasn't a killing blow, but it was deeply insulting. The creature scrambled to its feet, now bleeding from multiple wounds, covered in sticky sap, on fire in a few places from Jake's torchwork, and thoroughly reconsidering its dinner plans. Jake stood between the creature and the cadets, holding his spear in one hand and a rock in the other, breathing hard, but grinning like a maniac. Here's the thing about Earth, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Every single creature on our planet that tried to eat us, we ate them instead. We turned them into shoes. We made them pull our farming equipment. We domesticated their descendants and taught them tricks for treats. So you can leave now, or you can become a really ugly jacket. Your choice. The creature, despite not speaking human standard, seemed to understand the core message. It looked at Jake, looked at the organized chaos of cadets with improvised weapons, looked at its bleeding leg and sticky shoulder, and made an executive decision. It limped back into the jungle with whatever dignity it had left, which wasn't much. The clearing fell silent again. Then Torque started clicking his mandibles in what Krell recognized as chithnoid laughter. Did the human just threaten to turn a Verdana alpha predator into clothing? Weapon 49, Jake said, still catching his breath. Psychological warfare. Sometimes the best weapon is making the other guy think you're crazier than they are. Pila floated down, pulsing impressed gold. That was extraordinary. Terrifying, but extraordinary. Bloop oozed back over, having apparently gained back some of his evaporated mass from sheer adrenaline. I stabbed it. I actually stabbed it. You did great, buddy, Jake assured him. Everyone did. That's the thing about survival, it's a team sport. Individual weapons are good, but coordinated tactics with improvised tools, that's how you turn a death sentence into a Tuesday. Krell slowly lowered the blowgun, looking at his cadets. They were battered, terrified, and covered in various jungle substances. They were also alive, energized, and looking at each other, with the kind of pride that came from surviving something that should have killed them. He looked at Jake, who was now checking everyone for injuries and already making plans for improving their defensive perimeter. Murphy, Krell said quietly. Yes, sir? How many weapons are you up to now? Jake considered, counting on his fingers. Well, we used 48, which was the torch. 49 was the psychological warfare. I'm thinking we need to set up some deadfalls for 50 through 53, maybe a few more snares for 54 through 57. Oh, and I noticed some of those explosive seed pods earlier. Those could be 58 through 60 if we rig them right. So, conservatively? By morning, probably 75. Maybe 80 if I get creative with Bloop's slime secretions. Sorry, Bloop, but your species' mucus has some interesting adhesive properties. Bloop squelched, something resigned. Krell sat down again, all four arms hanging loose. I'm going to have to rewrite the entire training manual, aren't I? Probably, sir. But hey, look on the bright side. There's a bright side? Nobody died. Everyone learned something, and you've got the most exciting case study in Academy history. That time a human violated the spirit of every rule. While technically following them, all is going to be a legendary lecture series. Despite himself, despite everything, despite 40 years of strict protocol and military discipline, Krell felt something that might have been a laugh trying to escape. He suppressed it, mostly. Fine, he said. We fortify the camp. We set up your ridiculous traps. We survive the next 48 hours. And when we get back to the academy, you're going to teach a seminar on improvised weapons for every single instructor. Can I call it Everything is a Weapon if you're creative enough? Absolutely not. Applied Environmental Combat Engineering? Better. Jake grinned and turned back to the group. Okay, people, let's build some fortifications. Torque, I need you to start moving those heavy logs. Pila, scout the perimeter and mark good ambush points. Bloop, you're on adhesive production. I know it's gross, but we need that slime. And sir, he looked at Krell, you're on quality control. If something looks too dangerous, tell me. If something looks too insane, also tell me, but I might do it anyway. As the cadets scattered to their tasks, energized by their victory and Jake's manic confidence, Krell watched them work. 15,000 graduates, 247 species, 40 years of perfect protocol. And it took one human less than 24 hours to turn his entire methodology upside down. The terrifying part? It had worked. The more terrifying part? Krell was pretty sure this was going to work again, and again, and again. Humans didn't just survive. They turned survival into a competitive sport with themselves. He made a mental note to update his statistics. 99.3% success rate, 0.7% died. And now, 0.001% turned the entire exercise into an improvised weapons demonstration that would traumatize generations of instructors. Krell would need a drink when they got back. Several drinks. Maybe an entire barrel. The extraction shuttle touched down exactly 72 hours after the drop, and Krell had never been more relieved to see a spacecraft in his entire career. The cadets emerged from the jungle looking like they'd been through a war, which, technically, they had. Torque had adapted Jake's sap club into a permanent weapon he refused to put down. Pila had become disturbingly efficient with the sling, and kept making comments about optimal projectile trajectories. Bloop had discovered a confidence that came from repeatedly stabbing things much larger than himself, and was now actually his normal size instead of fear compressed. And Jake looked exactly the same. Torn shirt, improvised weapons hanging from every available attachment point, and that smile that suggested he'd just had the best weekend of his life. The Academy's main hall was packed 3 weeks later for the graduation ceremony. Word had spread. Instructors from every department had shown up. There were species Krell had never even seen before, apparently drawn by the rumors of the human who broke Instructor Krell. Krell stood at the podium, his dress uniform feeling uncomfortably formal after the jungle exercise. The manual, his manual, refined over decades, sat in front of him. He'd brought it as a prop. He was about to set it on fire. Metaphorically, anyway. Cadets, faculty, honored guests, Krell began, his voice carrying the weight of someone about to admit they'd been wrong for 40 years. I have trained over 15,000 students. I have perfected a curriculum based on pure survival principles. No weapons, no technology, only skill and instinct. He paused, letting the audience settle. 3 weeks ago, a human named Jake Murphy taught me that I've been teaching survival wrong this entire time. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The rule was simple: no weapons allowed. The philosophy was pure. True survival requires adapting to your environment, using only what nature provides, and your species' natural advantages. Krell picked up the manual. This philosophy is now outdated. He opened to a bookmarked page. The new rule, effective immediately, is this: no pre-manufactured weapons allowed. Anything you can create, improvise, or adapt from your environment is not only permitted, but encouraged. The murmurs became excited chatter. Murphy didn't break the rules. He exposed a flaw in my thinking. I had confused purity with effectiveness. I had mistaken limitation for challenge. The point of survival training isn't to restrict you, it's to prepare you for the reality that nature doesn't care about fairness, protocol, or my personal teaching philosophy. Krell gestured to Jake, who was sitting in the front row looking mildly embarrassed by the attention. This cadet arrived with a backpack and approved equipment. Within 8 hours, he had created 47 weapons. By the end of the exercise, he had armed and trained his entire squad, repelled multiple predator attacks, and established a fortified position that would have made a military engineer proud. He did this by recognizing a fundamental truth that I had overlooked. Krell held up the manual, then deliberately closed it. Everything is a resource. Every environment is an arsenal. The difference between survival and death isn't following rules, it's understanding that the rules exist to keep you alive. And if you can accomplish that goal through creativity and adaptation, then you're not cheating. You're winning. The crowd erupted in applause. Several species made their equivalent of approving sounds, clicks, pulses, harmonic resonances that together created a symphony of academic approval. Cadet Murphy, Krell called. Front and center. Jake stood and walked to the podium with the relaxed confidence of someone who'd stared down an apex predator and threatened to turn it into fashion. You are graduating top of your class, Krell announced, placing the Academy's highest honor medal around Jake's neck with 2 hands, while the other 2 clasped in a Sorthan gesture of respect. You are also hereby appointed as a consultant to our Curriculum Development Committee. We need someone to teach us how to think like prey that became predators. Sir, that's literally just humans. We're all like this. A collective sound of concern went through the audience. I'm aware, Krell said dryly, which is why I'm recommending the Galactic Survival Academy. Immediately recruit more human instructors before another species figures out your trick and we all become obsolete. Jake grinned. To be fair, sir, it's not really a trick. It's just pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, and a pathological refusal to accept death as an inevitable outcome. Plus, thumbs. Thumbs are really important. I've added a section on opposable digits to Chapter 3, Krell muttered. The ceremony continued, with other cadets receiving their certifications. Torque graduated with honors in adaptive combat. Pila received recognition for tactical positioning. Bloop got an award for Most Improved Confidence, which made him swell with pride, literally. Afterward, at the reception, Krell found himself standing next to Jake near the refreshment table. The human was examining the food with that same analytical look he'd used on jungle materials. You're evaluating the buffet's weapon potential, aren't you? Krell asked. The serving utensils have some interesting applications, Jake admitted. Well, and those skewers could definitely be. Please stop. Yes, sir. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Murphy, Krell said finally, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Shoot. Did you actually follow the rules? Or were you just creatively interpreting them because you knew I couldn't technically stop you? Jake considered this, swirling his drink. Honestly, sir, Both. I genuinely didn't bring any weapons. Everything I made from available resources following the parameters you set. But did I know I was pushing the boundaries? Yeah, absolutely. It's a human thing. We don't like being told we can't do something, so we find ways to technically comply while completely subverting the intent. It's infuriating. It's effective. It's infuriating because it's effective. Krell sighed, a long hissing sound. You know what the worst part is? What's that, sir? You were right. Completely. Frustratingly right. I watched my cadets transform from panicked prey into coordinated fighters in less than a day because you taught them to see their environment differently. That's what survival training should do. I was so focused on purity of method that I forgot the actual goal. Keeping people alive. Jake raised his glass. To adaptation over tradition? Krell clinked his glass against Jake's with one hand while the other two remained crossed. To adaptation. But Murphy, yes sir, if you ever enroll in my advanced course, I'm confiscating your boots, your belt, your shirt, and anything that could remotely be used as a tool. That's fair, sir. You'll probably still find 47 weapons. 47 is rookie numbers. Sir, by advanced course, I'm thinking more like 90. Krell's headache returned. Across the room, Torque was demonstrating his club technique to a group of fascinated cadets. Pila was giving an impromptu lecture on projectile physics using fruit from the buffet. Bloop was telling anyone who would listen about the time he totally stabbed this huge monster, and it ran away. Jake watched them with obvious pride. You know, he said conversationally, humans have this saying, give a person a fish, they eat for a day. Teach them to fish, they eat for a lifetime. I'm familiar with the concept. Yeah, but we also have a follow-up. Teach them to make a fishing spear, a net, a trap, and 3 backup plans, and they'll never go hungry and probably accidentally conquer their local ecosystem. That's not inspirational, that's concerning. Welcome to humanity, sir. We're very concerning, but we're also very good at not dying. And now your cadets are too. Krell looked at his rebuilt curriculum, his transformed teaching philosophy. His cadets who were alive and confident because one human had shown them that rules were guidelines and creativity was survival. Murphy, he said, making a decision. How would you like a permanent position as a survival instructor? Jake's eyes lit up. Really? With conditions. You'll teach within the new framework. You'll coordinate with the safety committee. And you'll stop calling it Weapon 47 and start calling it Self-Defense Application 47. We have public relations to consider. I can work with that. Also, you're required to document every improvised tool you create, full specifications, applications, and risk assessments. So I get to make an official manual of improvised weapons for the Galactic Survival Academy? Under strict academic supervision, yes. Jake's smile could have powered a small star. Sir, I'm going to make you so proud. Or horrified. Possibly both simultaneously. That's what I'm afraid of, Krell muttered. But as he watched, Jake immediately start sketching weapon designs on a napkin while explaining them to a captivated audience of instructors, Krell realized something important. For 40 years, he'd taught survival as restriction and discipline. Jake had taught him that survival was creativity and adaptation. Both approaches had merit. Combined, they might actually keep people alive in situations neither could handle alone. Plus, the Academy's enrollment had already tripled for next semester. Apparently, word had spread across the galaxy that the Galactic Survival Academy now offered human-style improvised combat engineering. Marketing had pitched a fit about the name. Krell had overruled them. As Jake continued his napkin presentation, enthusiastically describing something he called the Emergency Spork Defense System, Krell made one final note in his manual. Addendum. When teaching survival to humans, remember that they survived their own planet by turning everything into a weapon, a tool, or a friend, sometimes all three. Do not attempt to restrict this instinct. Instead, channel it productively and keep medical staff on. Stand by. He closed the manual and smiled, something Sorothans rarely did, and never in public. But this was a special occasion. After all, it wasn't every day your entire teaching philosophy got dismantled by a species that looked at the universe and saw nothing but potential and problems to solve, preferably with improvised weapons and terrible puns. Krell raised his glass toward Jake, who noticed, and raised his napkin full of weapon sketches in return. To humanity, Krell thought. May they never change, and may we always be prepared for whatever they improvise next. though he was absolutely checking Jake's boots at the next exercise. Just in case. Jake leaned over to Torque as the reception continued. Hey, want to know something funny? What? Jake pulled up his pant leg slightly, revealing a small folding knife strapped to his ankle. Had this the whole time. Just thought the improvised stuff would be more fun. Torque's mandibles froze mid-click. Across the galaxy, on Earth, humanity continued doing what it did best, surviving, adapting, and occasionally weaponizing things that had no business being weapons. And in the jungles of Verdana 6, 3 razorbacks told their offspring stories about the small, squishy creature that tied rocks to vines and made them question their entire existence. The legend of the human with 47 weapons spread across the galaxy, growing with each retelling. The actual number was closer to 93 by the end. But who was counting? Jake was. Jake was definitely counting. He was already planning the syllabus for improvised weapons 201. Krell's headache was going to be legendary.